Hello, this is Mr. Gomez. In this video, I'm going to be talking about the math activities for the week of 323 through 327. You can find them on the weekly parent guide document. The first activity that we ask the kids to do for 20 minutes each day is to work on the Dreambox Math Online Learning app, which we have a separate video if you need information on that, but that can be accessed here at the top or through their web desk. But down here in the activities, we have them doing measurement for Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and then working on clocks and time on Tuesday and Thursday. Over here on the left, you can see our learning targets is to working on measurement and working on telling time. And it's important to note that for first grade, our main focus is telling time to the hour and to the half hour. Now, as you start learning time, if your student is ready to start working on minutes and other parts of the clock, that's fine. But our main goal is that they are able to tell time to the hour and to the half hour, and they have the vocabulary and the understanding for doing that. So Monday is very easy. You're just going to watch a measurement video, Brain Pop. This is a video that the kids are very familiar with watching, Brain Pop Junior. I'm going to pull up just real quickly here so you can see what it looks like. And when you watch this video, I want to point out a couple things. The first one is in this video, she shows measuring with her feet, and that she's measuring with her heel touching her toe. Later in the week, we're going to have the kids measure things in their house, and it's important that they don't have any gaps between their feet when they're measuring, and that they understand that measuring, they need to touch each other when they're measuring with their feet. So if you can point that out to them when they're doing their measurement. And then also later in the video, it shows measuring with objects, which is something we're going to do also later in the week. And it's important that whatever object that they use, that they're all the same size, and that when they measure them, that there's no gaps and that they're touching each other end to end. So the same thing, if you could observe and make sure that they're using these units, whatever they decide to measure with. It can be anything that you have objects, Legos, crayons, pencils, anything that are standard objects, and that they're measuring them correctly without the gaps. And they can watch this video again anytime during the week to remind them how to measure with these different objects. So Monday is just watch that video. That's the only activity that they have to do. On Wednesday, they're going to be measuring using their feet, as I talked about, and they're going to measure from these different places, from the sink to the table, TV to the couch. If for some reason those are something that you don't have in your house, or it's not a good measurement, you can think of any kind of measurement, or you could add other things for them to measure in the house. And it would be a fun activity to have the parents and the kids, or different kids, measure, to talk about how it's different numbers with different size feet. And then the last activity on Friday, we have for them to measure distance using objects. As I talked about, they can be any kind of objects that you have that are all the same size. We gave some suggestions down here, but anything you have, if you have pennies, a bunch of pennies, or anything that you can think of that they can measure with. But we're not measuring with measuring tapes or rulers at this time. We're using non-standard units, which is just objects. So those are the three measuring activities that they're going to be doing during the week. And I do want to point out, and I think I mentioned this in the other video, that there are not any activities that are required to be turned in this week. We're going to start that next week, but this week we're just asking that they complete the activities, and they're not going to be turning anything in. For the time, we have this online analog clock that they can see. So if you click on this, it'll open up an analog clock. The first thing that we're going to have ask you to do is to turn off the digital clock at the top, so that they're not using that to help them. And this is just a clock that they can use and play with. If they click on the minute hand, it moves. If they click on the hour hand and hold it, it moves, so they can change the time. So the first activity on Tuesday, we're asking you to have the kids set the clock to these different times. So again, we're focusing on half hour and hour. And so if you tell them to set the clock to 7:30, they would change it until it said 7:30. One thing you might want to point out to them is that a lot of times the hour hand is in between the two, and anytime it's in between the two numbers, it always goes back to the lower number. So this obviously would be 7:30. That is one of the things that is difficult for the kids to understand because they want it to point to the 7, which obviously it only does at 7 o'clock. And then if you want to, and then have them change it to something like 10 o'clock, and make sure you're using that terminology, the 10 o'clock and the 10:30, as you're having them set the time to the different ones. And then what we're going to do on Thursday, on both days, we're having them, you set the clock and then you give them a time and they have to set the clock. So it's them working with both of those things. So first they set the clock, and then on the next one, at the bottom down here, you're going to put the clock on a time that you want to put it on. Again, focusing on hour and half hour, and then they have to tell you what that time is. So if you put the clock here, they would need to be able to tell you what the time is. I will say that this is a new content area for most of the kids. So if they struggle at first, don't be alarmed. This isn't something that most of the classes have introduced completely, and time is something that is typically a little bit more difficult for first grade students. So it's something that if you want to work on it every day during the week, there's nothing wrong with that. And then if your child is ready to start working on minutes or 5-minute increments, you can do that as well. And that's the activities for math for this week: Dreambox, measurement, and then clock activity.